Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Only the brave survive past lunchtime, and fewer now than before. But let's move on. Our next panel is going to be entitled "The ASEAN Film Economy: The Trends and Movements Ahead." We're joined by Trinh Le Minh Hang from Vietnam, Roselle Monteverde, Dilon Teo, and Chan Jin Kai. And moderating will be Leon Tan from Dragon Slate Media. Can we invite them on stage, please?
Hi everyone, thank you for coming back to our sessions after lunch. I know it was hard, but we will endeavor to make this session very interesting. Every year in this conference, we have this session to evaluate what's happened in ASEAN, in our industry, and also to project what's to come, both the prospects and the opportunities as well as the challenges. I have here with me several individuals who are at the forefront, the tip of the creative spear, if you like, in their own territories, to evaluate what's happening, to share with us what's happening in their part of the world, as well as ASEAN as a whole. We have on my extreme right, I have Chan Jin Kai from Silver Media Group. Jin Kai needs no real introduction. After all, he and his team are the reason why we're here. They put together Screen Singapore the last few years now, and sessions like this. So Jin Kai will bring to bear his thoughts on this session today. Next person is Roselle Monteverde. She's from Regal Entertainment. Regal is interesting because they've been making films in the Philippines since the 60s. So we really have someone of regal stature here in our industry. Next is we have Trinh Le Minh Hang from Skyline Media. Real powerhouse, because I know this myself, in Vietnam, doing very interesting things. She will also share her thoughts with us today. And finally, of course, we have Dilon Teo from Indonesia with Nation Pictures. Dilon's been making films since 2008 as part of Nation Pictures, including a co-production with Gorilla Entertainment, the first of its kind in Indonesia. So people who've blazed the trail in their respective territories, here to share with us today. So my first question I want to direct to Jin Kai. Jin, a year has passed since we've evaluated ASEAN.
Yes.
What's changed, and what's changed, and what should we expect in the coming future, both in terms of the promises and also the challenges ahead?
Yeah, I think I can't speak for all the individual countries, right? What I take away, my insights would be like what happens at the project market. I think for most of you, you know that we have a project market over the last 2 days where we receive entries from all over Southeast Asia. We pick the best projects and then we get them to have a chance to meet upstairs. Over the last 2 days with financiers, with distributors, with festival organizers. And from the feedback I gather from all these decision makers who met up with the projects, the consensus among all of them is that, wow, this year's project is even better than the last. And last year, when I got the feedback from the decision makers last year, they said, wow, this year is better than the last. So we have all these different international experts coming from different parts of the world, coming here for our project market, and each year they say the Southeast Asian projects are getting better. So I think that's something positive we can take away. That comes because of a few reasons. I think one, people are starting to notice us more now. I think that's a good thing for all of us in Southeast Asia. But besides people overseas noticing us, is also the fact that I think we are going through a very steep learning curve here in Southeast Asia. And that's good because we are learning fast. We may come from a low base, but we are picking up so quickly and it's noticeable to the rest of the world. So actually kudos to a lot of you for how you are starting to think more internationally. Even this year, we see a lot of more traditional companies wanting to break out of their comfort zone. Like just 2-3 years ago, I remember going to different countries, talking to the biggest companies in these different countries, and the reply they always got is, I don't need to think about other countries because I'm the king of my country. Why do I need to think beyond that? But this year alone, I see a lot of them, no, actually I want to break out and not just be the king of my country, I want to explore the rest of the world. So I think this is a very interesting and exciting time for Southeast Asia right now, where we all starting to think, hey, let's really conquer the world together. And this makes me feel really positive about Southeast Asia.
Actually, I agree with you. In the last couple of years, I've seen many local heroes starting to look beyond, right? But at the same time, the challenges, as you say, the steep learning curve, you have challenges in terms of mindsets. They want to go overseas, but they haven't a clue how to do it, right? They have challenges in terms of expertise. They may be good in doing local work, but when the rigors of regional, I'm sure you know this, Dylan, the rigors of international co-productions, when other producers and global distributors and agents demand a certain quality, not just creative, but technical, like post, for example, all these things come to bear. How do we as collectively as producers address this as fast as we can to cross the learning curve and find our place in the sun among global producers?
So the politically correct answer is come for more conferences at the SAFF and learn from all the experts here. No, okay, of course. Not just SAFF. I think attending conferences in different parts of the world always works. A lot of what I learned is because of conferences I attend elsewhere, right? I would love to believe that I was born with this intelligence, but I wasn't. And a lot of it comes from learning through the School of Hard Knocks. I started co-producing internationally since 12 years ago. And that's because, now one of the pros and cons of being born in Singapore is like we know we're a small country. And from the start, we knew we have to co-produce overseas. We are forced by circumstances. Being king of Singapore means nothing because we are so small, right? So from the start, we always wanted to venture overseas. And it was really School of Hard Knocks because not a lot of people in this region have gone overseas. But I think the advantage is there are some others like me who have over the last decade and a half pushed for co-productions and they learn the mistakes. And there'll be people who are willing to share the learning points. Another way is to then work with, let's say, people like me, people like some of the others who are experienced, working together to venture out. So I'm not saying that we're the best around, but then we do not need to work alone, right? Because as co-producers, who says it cannot be Singapore and Vietnam doing something with Africa, right? We can do it together, right? So I think Southeast Asia, we can work as a block rather than as a standalone.
Great. Coming to Roselle, you've been making films, so your company's been making films since the 60s. Right, in the Philippines. Clearly, you're pretty much, you've got the pulse of what happens, what the kind of content and the audience in the Philippines. Now, you are faced with an ASEAN outlook. How do you, from your perspective, cross over into making things more for regional and global from the Philippines?
Yes, it's actually a bit a challenge for our company to do that because we've been in tune to local production for like quite decades, number of decades already. So we're opening up for co-production with ASEAN nations, and we've seen the trend towards, foreign movies, and especially our last ASEAN movie that came from Thailand, which is Bad Genius, that did really well in our country. So, these things open the minds of, it shows that there is a market in our country, not only just for local production, but as long as there is a great story to tell doesn't matter which country it is from, it will be a success. And the challenge for us is really maybe looking for the right partner, but our company is really open to that type of deals and production.
So you're saying that a good international or foreign producer co-producing with you guys is your way forward to explore terra incognito, if you like, uncharted territory.
Yes, yes, yes. And since the platforms for showcasing all these movies now has been expanded not only to cinemas but also in the digital platform, which in the trend right now in digital platform in the Philippines is really growing.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, as ASEAN, we have such an interesting pastiche of economies. We have a first world economy like Singapore, and then we have emerging economies, and we have economies in the middle like Malaysia and so forth. And all of us, in some ways, we can explore the digital frontier easily because we don't have much legacy. Like in the case of Indonesia, so underserved, right? Your cinema market, you can explore digital opportunities and so forth. Yeah. Actually, I have a question for Hang. Vietnam is one of the countries we are all looking at with interest. It's exploding in terms of economic growth, its cultural expression, and cinema. Even way back in the 90s, I remember seeing Vietnamese films doing well in film festivals as a college student. I mean, I think I remember watching, was it Scent of the Green Papaya? Was that Vietnamese? Which one? Scent of the Green Papaya, was that a Vietnamese? Anyway, I remember seeing Vietnamese films and as far back, and now you're making films too. How do you see what you do in your industry, both in enriching your industry and also branching out into addressing the opportunities in ASEAN and the region?
Hi everyone. Maybe among here I am, and also my company is the youngest. We established from 2013, which means it's like over 3 years or something. And during that time, I have produced like until now 5 feature films myself. And that is really a very rapid growth for my company as well as the market as well. So the same with what Leon said. Actually, Vietnam market is growing really fast. And actually, I don't see a lot of investment from other Asian country, but Korea is the giant there. When they put a lot of investment there from CJ and Lotte in developing a lot of cinemas as well as bring in all of the blockbuster from Hollywood and many others. So, but recently, so beside Korea is a giant guy. All of the local production company right now also open up to look for co-production in other countries as long as the story is good and suitable for our local markets. Yeah, so, and we are in the same case. Yeah.
Would you see digital platforms being crucial for Vietnam? What is your view on that?
Sure. Digital platform is really growing as well. If we talk about the comparison between last year and this year, there is something changed and something unchanged. For example, the number of film released in cinema are quite the same, but the quality of the film in this year are much better than last year. So that is one thing. The second thing is about box office. So for example, the highest box office of the Vietnamese film in 2016 is about $3 million US. So this year, that's really a boom for a very normal romantic comedy film, but the box office is $8 million. So that is also a very growth. And one more thing which is not changed is a genre of the film releasing in the cinema is quite the same. It's still very diversified to all of the commercial genre like horror, like action comedy, like romantic comedy, something like that. It's still quite the same. But like in 2017, there are one major difference is the remake from Korea. That is really one thing that we see a big difference, that we have bought a lot of IP from Korea, especially Korea. I don't know why, but Korea, and we make a lot of remakes. And so this year, next year, the audience in Vietnam will see many remakes in the cinemas. But still, we cannot foresee whether it is really with good results or not, because it really depends on the quality of the products and how the story are told. Yeah, so there are something changed and unchanged during 2 years.
Sounds like the experiences of many ASEAN territories. Some things don't change, some things desperately want to change. Right? Yeah. Dylan, your experience with Nation and Indonesia. We all know that Indonesia is really the gorilla in the region, about 250 million people. You've been making films for ages, and some of these films have direct cultural impact in countries like Malaysia, where I come from. And also you've done a global, a foreign co-production before. So give us your insights on what's happening now in Indonesia in terms of audiences and what they want, how they're viewing their content now. Do they still want to go to cinemas? And your cinemas are great, by the way. Yeah, or do they want to see things on an iPad? And how do you address that as a filmmaker and a person who's done some foreign co-production work?
Okay, so it's good to be here. Anyway, I've noticed the trend in Indonesia in the last couple of years has been very, very interesting. We had our peak in 2008 in the new wave of the Indonesian cinema, and after that, it has been declining. But somehow in 2012, after the release of this action movie called The Raid, then international companies have started noticing Indonesia all of a sudden. You have films like Eat, Pray, Love that was shot in Bali. And as of this year, it's very, very interesting. You have a lot of international companies that have set up shop in Indonesia. Legendary producer like Mario Casar is producing an Indonesian film. And, Korean companies like CJ, they have done some co-production with Indonesia. And, CJ even come in and invest in cinema, which actually helps us. I mean, for a nation with population of 260 million people, we only have about 300 cinemas, so that's, I would say, it's very, very sad with only 1,300 screens. But as of this year, the number one box office that we have is a horror, and the box office is around $6 million. And it's going around it's going around the world right now. It will be theatrically distributed in 40 countries. So I always believe, the audience in Indonesia, they are always looking for something new, something good and something exciting. So I always believe with good story, it's a good vehicle for a movie to travel.
Do you think that, as you say, because of the raid and so on, there's some global attention now focused on Indonesia? What do you think about Indonesian producers themselves? Are they ready to make these sort of alliances? Do they have what it takes to cross over and deal with the expectations and the demands of a foreign co-production? Are there many of them, or just a handful? What is your view into the future? Is basically the filmmaking community ready to move forward and stake a claim in the international scene?
I think not all of the producers in Indonesia are ready for the capacity of international co-productions, but I believe there are a couple of producers that are ready to go global, to co-produce films and to do something outside of Indonesia. Like I think the director for the horror film, it's called Satan's Slave, and right now he's Pengabdi Setan, yes. Right now he's already being snatched left and right to direct films outside of Indonesia. So I think there's a lot of potential, and I would love to see in the next couple of years the progress that we will have eventually.
Let's take a look. We've all looked at our various countries. Let's all take a look at ASEAN as a whole, because organizations like SAVA, for example, are trying to create a network of filmmakers, film producers, directors, creators, to share information, to share opportunities, and in some ways to create a cultural, if not a commercial identity of filmmaking in ASEAN as a united, I guess, identity. What are your thoughts? I want to start from Jinkai and go down with the rest of you. What are your thoughts on whether we can accomplish an Asian identity as we move forward as filmmakers and businessmen in the film industry to establish something that can be recognized around the world? Okay, this is an ASEAN country, just like we say this is a European film, or this is a North American film. What does that even mean, really, except that they speak English or French, right? So what do you think the ASEAN identity would be like, and how do we get there? Just Jin.
Yeah, I think it's really a mindset shift, right? So if you talk to the Italians, they say, no, we are not like the French. You talk to the French, they say, no, we're not like the Germans, right? And that's what they say. But then from the outside, we think they're all Europeans, right? And it's the same over here, right? To them, okay, we are Southeast Asians, right? We are yellow skin or we're brown skin. They don't look upon us as Thailand and Philippines and Singapore and Malaysia. In fact, we ask them to point out on the map where we are, they'll probably point China or something like that. So the differentiation is actually what we feel, right? It's not how the rest of the world view us. It's us who are actually try to draw borders, okay? And unless we decide to really integrate closer and not mind our passports, okay, and look upon us as storytellers, storytellers who want to tell a story that we can share with the rest of the world, then I think us being integrated can happen more organically. I know a lot of times we sort of look towards the government to take the lead. Oh, our governments don't even sign co-production treaties with each other, so how are we going to co-produce? Who says we need to wait for the government to do that, right? So if we want to co-produce, we co-produce regardless of whether our governments have signed a treaty. So I think it's really about us wanting to have a mindset that is open, right? But I think too often we look at the Europeans and say, oh, they can do a lot of that because they got co-production treaties all over and they can tap on each other's grants and all that, and because of that we can't. But that's not true. I mean, I've co-produced with Indonesia, I've co-produced with Philippines, I co-produced with actually most of the countries in ASEAN. And so just now I was asked, why not with Vietnam yet? I'm sorry, that will happen very soon. Right? But I think it comes with us wanting to do it, regardless of whether the government is ready and regardless of how others think. Right? If we organically want to tell a story together, I think we can.
Rosal.
Yeah, that's really very reachable. What I'm saying is because, you know, the environment in ASEAN itself, it's unique from many other regions in the world. So that alone is something that, you know, something that really nice to showcase, you know, and for all ASEAN nations to work together, regardless of, you know, difference in religion or in color, you know, we can create a very strong story and with a good setup, as I've said, rich in culture and a great story that we can tell, you know, we can stand out again with the rest of the world.
Han.
Yeah, from my perspective, and also as a producer, if you ask me which country do I want to co-produce with, then for sure I will answer the countries in ASEAN. Why? Because we share the same culture, quite the same culture. We also share quite the same taste. Our audience are the same. So, I mean, we have a high possibility of having good results if we do co-production with ASEAN country. Yes. And no, because actually, from my point of view, each country in ASEAN should compete with each other. Why? So that all of us can grow together. Because right now, from what I see, and also I attend many film festivals, and I see a big gap between our quality. I'm so sorry. Compared with other areas. So why not that we have some kind of activities to share our film together so that we see our growth together. That is also a good way of doing so that we can compare, we can exchange, and we can share what we can do together so that we can grow better together. So it's the same thing with, actually from Vietnam government, they don't actually have a lot of fun to do much. But for example, the last Vietnam Film Festival that we have just attended last week, that this is the first time that they organize the ASEAN Film Festival, that they invite all of the film, the good film from all of the Asian countries to Vietnam to have a competition. It's a kind of film festival. But this is a very good way. And what they share is that this kind of film festival will be rotated in each of the Asian country every year. So to me, we really appreciate such kind of occasion. So that is a very good way for us to work together, to share and to network.
Thank you. Dylan?
What I think is Yeah, I agree with Jin Kai that we don't have to wait for the government to be able to do a co-production with the other country. And there has been a lot of my colleagues in Indonesia that have been doing co-production with countries like America or even the Europe. And they don't view Indonesia as, when they do co-production with Indonesia, that they are doing an Indonesian film. No, they are doing a co-production. For example, there has been a remake of a Korean film in Indonesia, and it was doing well. So, the possibility of Asian co-production in ASEAN is very, very possible and very feasible. And I have seen the progress in the last couple of years. Yeah.
I just want to add my own thoughts. I agree with Jin that, when there are willing producers coming together, anything can be done. It's really just structuring an arrangement or business or agreement or whatever. And also, I agree with Hang also that it's also, and with Dylan and with Roselle, that the willingness is there for us to want to make films together with our partners in the region. But how do we do it? How do we do it? I seem to think that there are two things. The first one is we can start with actually very simple technical arrangements, like Jin, for example, has posted his Philippines film in Malaysia, post-production. Hang is about to also do post-production in film in Malaysia. So these things already start the process of collaboration, right? It has nothing to do with, hey, what kind of story you want to tell. We just start with that, simple things like that. And then soon we'll have a wonderfully unique diversity in our production teams, right? A Philippine director, a Singaporean producer, a Malaysian post-production, and an Indonesian lead. That's the kind of thing that can happen independent of us cracking our heads figuring out what to do, right? I think that's easy. That part's easy. The second thing also I think is that as we do this, we want to tell our stories together. And it could be as simple as a Singaporean guy who ends up in Vietnam and gets lost, right? Right? It's like Lost in Translation, Singaporean guy, something like that. That already becomes a uniquely ASEAN story, right? And obviously these stories bring our commonalities together as we struggle through our diversity. So I think it's there. It really is there. So I guess we should start making these films, right?
Yeah. Well, I think when I look at the barriers, right, when producers talk to each other, I think what very often stops us from really co-producing is ego, right? Yeah. Like, I'm sure all of us have stories, and we get together, you want to do my story? No, do my story, right? And because we're all trying to push our own stories, in the end, co-productions don't get made, right? But I think we should approach it from real creative people point of view. The better story should be the one to get made first, regardless of whether it is yours or mine, right? But if you are so close to our own baby, wanting to make ours first, then in the end, co-productions are always hard to put together. Like I always tell the story, right? I've written many different stories. My favorite story of all has never been produced. My second one, not been produced. My third one has been produced, right? And that's because somehow, very often I end up doing somebody else's story, even if they don't do my story, right? It's always the best story that should be made, right? And it's also recognizing what are our different countries' strengths and weaknesses. The film that Leon talked about just now, where I did post-production in Malaysia, it was a film written in the US, okay, financed out of Singapore, shot in the Philippines, and post-produced in Malaysia, right? It wasn't, no, we should do everything in US or do everything in Singapore or do everything in Philippines. It's like, well, we go to where each country has its strengths. Malaysia has got very good post-production facilities, right? Philippines was a great place to shoot this story, and Singapore has got nothing much except some money and a strong environment for contracts, right? And so we look at what the respective strengths of the different countries are, and we put that together, right? There shouldn't be a nationalistic or ego-driven thing. No, everything has to be done in my country. So if we approach it putting aside our egos and being willing to share our babies, that means if it's our film, but we're working on it together right now, then it becomes our baby. So if you look at it that way, I think co-productions become easier to put together.
Thanks, Jin. We have about 15 minutes. I'd like to open this time to the participants on the floor for any questions. Right, you put your hand up first. Gentleman in front.
Hello, mic test. Okay. My name is Hamid. I'm from GIC. We are a startup and we are looking at financing film in ASEAN. Okay, we gone to Indonesia and to look for a few films to invest. So my question is for Dylan. Okay, the biggest box office was Warkop. Yeah, I think it's around 40 million or something like that.
It was a 7 million audience, so it's about 10 million
Yeah,
US.
okay.
Yeah.
So, and latest one was Joko Anwar, Pengabdi Setan. So, my question is, what do you think would be the trend in Indonesia? Is it for a remake for comedy or horror? That's my first question. Okay, my second question is for Vietnam. Okay, we are looking into going into Vietnam too, and we want to know what is actually the cost of production, and also how much is it do we need to the cost for the promotion of the film, because in Indonesia I know sometimes the cost of promotion is almost the same as the cost of production. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
So, Mr. Hamid, thank you. Anyway, yeah, the number one box office of all time is a comedy, and for this year, the number one box office is a horror by Joko Anwar. It's called Pengabdi Setan, and Pengabdi Setan itself is actually a remake of a horror in the 1980s. So, local producers, they have this habit of, let's say, if a horror is making it and making a box office success, so there will be consecutively a lot of a horror that will be released in the cinema. I know so far that there are about 60 horror films that will be released next year after the success of Joko Anwar's Pengabdi Setan. And there will be a few remakes of horror of the past during the 1970s and the 1980s that will be remake and released next year. So yeah, that's my answer. I think for next year will be horror, because of we have this habit of making something that is successful. So yeah, until the trend fades away.
For Vietnam, the production costs really have a big range. If we talk about the history of the recent, from the recent years, people do production. For example, they are confident that they do a horror with a very cheap price, so about 150,000 US dollar. And there are some big blockbuster like action or comedy. It's about 1.5 million US dollar, something like that. So that is a big range. So it's really depend on your products to see which genre. But my tip is that if that is a co-production from other country, so you should be careful in choosing the right genre to do co-production, because we already have some cases that we tried to do co-production, but because of the cultural difference, then it didn't work out. So yeah, be careful about that. And regarding the promotion cost, normally what the distributor they are doing, we rely on the production cost, and we do like 20% of the production cost to be the promotion costs.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. Jinka has partly answered it, but I still want to ask it in a way. How important do you think are our government's involvement in, I'm asking all of you, by the way. Is it important to the Philippines or to Vietnam or to Indonesia, for example, that if your governments got involved with incentives and rebates and investments in infrastructure and training, would that be a critical factor in your success or your industry's success moving forward? Not just to upgrade the kind of films that's being made in your market, but also to engage with international productions and scenes. Okay, you can answer. You can answer.
Okay, well, I think government help is a double-edged sword, right? Double-edged sword because I think, let's say for Singapore, it is useful. It's useful if you're starting out to have some government help, right? Considering our really small base, right, and correspondingly lesser talents and everything, it's very hard for us to quickly grow in industry. Very hard to really train the people. Very hard for anyone to even want to work with us because we're so small. So I think that helps a lot. Even my first few productions when I first started out, I had government incentives to help me out. But it's double-edged sword because I always say, every money comes with strings attached, right? No one's going to give you money without strings attached. But the difference is it a string or a rope or a chain? If it's a string, okay, we'll take it. But if it's a chain, then it becomes too painful sometimes to use that money. And government money can be like that sometimes, right? It ties you down to a lot of different restrictions. So for example, if I want to use Singapore money, I have to hire a lot of Singapore crew, probably even shoot in Singapore, but then I can shoot in any Southeast Asian country without government incentives and still cheaper than shooting in Singapore with incentives. So it doesn't really make economic sense anymore, right? And also the government very often is not as aware about how the industry works. They don't know what works for the market, right? So I used to submit a lot of projects to the government, and the ones that often get picked are what they think is good, but what I think are my second-rate or third-rate ideas. So in the end, it's not always the best films, the best ideas that get produced. So there are the difficulties with working in the government. I think if we look upon it as a springboard, right, for us to enter the market, for us to get ourselves known, for us to get the first couple of films made, and I think that is good. But if you build your whole business model around receiving government grants, which I think quite a few Singapore companies do that, right? They always apply for government grant, they always get it, and then the way they structure their finance, their budget is always dependent on that. Then the question is this, then have you really grown as a company? Okay, and what if the government stops funding? Can you even survive as a company? Right, so it becomes a double-edged sword when we rely on it as a crutch instead of a springboard for us to grow further than that. I know, actually, if we look at some of the strongest filmmaking countries, there are no government grants, right? India is a super strong filmmaking company, no government help. Indonesia has no government help and is super strong, right? US, right? China, no government help, and they're all super strong. So it's not true that we really always need it in order to do well. But I think for smaller countries, if there is, make full use of it, but it cannot become a crutch.
Yeah, this is a similar experience in Malaysia too. We used to call, I think we still call companies that rely on grants grant-entrepreneurs, actually. So, and they do face the same situation too. Like, if you don't have these incentives, can you survive as a company? And the reality is that we should take what the government gives us, bank on it, and grow, and then one day we are weaned off it, and we can live without it. And then we give back. And I think that's a responsible thing to do as a filmmaker and a participant in an industry like ours. Yeah. That said, sorry.
Yeah, and in fact, I like what he said about weaning ourselves off and giving back. So I'm always of the opinion that more experienced companies, the older companies, we shouldn't even apply. We should give new companies a chance. So I always look at some of the older companies or successful companies, I think, why are they still applying? As long as they're applying for a grant, they're depriving new filmmakers of a chance to do that, right? So, and I think we should, as the older companies, those of us here, we should, hey, let's give new filmmakers a chance because they are the ones who really need a leg up.
Great. I think we have a question here. This gentleman over here. And then after that, you. Okay.
Millennials and Gen Z generations are becoming more and more a part of the consuming demographic, especially in Southeast Asia, I believe. Can each of you talk about the data you have in your respective countries and and how millennials and Gen Zs are influencing your choices of content?
Indonesia?
Yes. To target the millennials and the Gen Z is very important. As you know that they are all always on their cell phone. So with the coming of the current OTT provider company that comes to Indonesia, like let's say Hook and iFlix from Malaysia, and it has established quite a growth. I don't have the exact data, but it has established quite a growth and the users of the OTT. And so us as a filmmakers, we get the opportunity to work with these OTTs to create contents to cater to the millennials and the Gen Z market, which is important because as time goes on and as like technology rise up, I think the importance of OTT will be substantial to the millennials market.
Roselle?
The growth of digital platform in Manila, in the Philippines, is really growing. Purchases of data or broadband services has gone up over the years, and the forecast over the next 5 years is at least more than half of the population, or at least 70% uses data. So that's the reason why I think we have 3 OTT that are already in Manila, like Hook in the Philippines, like Hook, iFlix, and Netflix. So they see the importance in the growing market of the OTT platforms.
Vietnam?
Yeah, I think it's the same with Vietnam, that iFlix and Netflix are already there and to expand a lot. So besides that, also the local company also developed their own digital platform. There are 2 big guys there also, and they already started to produce something just for their platform. Like Lee, we already have Lee Vietnam. That's a remake of Lee US. So something like that. And because of as a film producer, we now not just relying on the cinema channel anymore, because it's really a challenge just to focus on them. Also, because just a few months, recently, like CJGV, they just started to reduce the ticket price. So it's really a very big issue to us as a filmmaker, because it totally affects our box office. So for example, last year, the highest box office was $3 million, and the same admission last year, but this year we just get like $2 million. So that's really a very big problem. So that's why right now we have to rely on other channels, not just digital also, but we have to rely on other countries as well to adding up on the total box office. Yeah.
Great, thanks guys. The gentleman in the back.
Hi. Patrick von Sahovsky. I'm chairing a panel this afternoon here on publicity and marketing for films, and I was going to give it a shameless plug by asking the panelists whether they feel that producers are budgeting for P&A, or are they just throwing all the money into getting the film finished and then hoping that once it gets picked up, it'll get promoted and find an audience?
Can I answer that? First of all, I'd hate to make a film where after I finish the film, I start looking around and seeing if anybody wants to pick it up. Definitely in the way we make films, we would want to have a distributor or sales agent or someone on the commercial side on board before the film is made. That's certainly our approach where I come from. So the whole process of P&A, of how the film gets out in whatever territories, we would already have a sensible strategy for that before we start first day of principal photography. That would be my approach, and I would not recommend any producer in this room and beyond to make a film, raise money from anywhere, whether it's from your parents or from the government, and then walk out into a market like this and say, hey, I have a finished film, who wants it? That's awful. That's awful, and we want to avoid that, to be honest. That would be definitely something, if you guys want to take away from this session, is please don't make a film before you even know where it's going. Yeah. Guys, do you want to?
Unless you have a established market for your finished film, why not, right? But especially when you're exploring other markets, I think it's really best to really know, to really market it well first before you start doing it.
it's same from here, that whenever we plan to do a project, we already have to plan for the marketing as well from the very beginning, and even that we have to shoot the teaser or the trailer even before the feature. Or yeah, we mean we have to do the parallel work, and the producer have to be always involved with the director, with the marketing team, as well as we ask the coordination from the actor as well from the very beginning to do all of the marketing stuff from social media into offline, online, and everything. But one of the challenge from our side is that we just can do it within our country only. So, for example, my very first horror film, that when I produce, I already targeted to go abroad, to go to other Asian country. That is already our target, and we did it. My film were released in Indonesia, Malaysia, and many other Asian countries as well. But we have no control on the marketing. And that's why it's very passive to us to know what's going on, what the audience like, and what we should improve later, something like that. We just can, right now, we just can control in our country only.
Indonesia?
I think we are facing the same problem. You know, as a producer, we have to put on many hats. We have to be the one to raise the fund, and we have to produce the movie, and we also have to distribute the movie, which I think is not quite a good system to have. So I think there's an opportunity for a distributor to come into the Southeast Asian market, to come in and set up shops and as distributor to help us producers to single out these jobs.
Thank you. I think our time is up. Thank you for attending this session, and we are available, obviously, to be pounced upon once we get off the stage. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.